So if we take a look of our skeleton, we'll start to notice that nothing is actually quite straight. So not only in terms of shape, but also in terms of alignment. So, and in terms of actually creation, and this is an interesting point. If you notice, if you take a look at the top of the arm, you'll see that the bone itself, and this is not just the make, but the bone itself also has a feeling of a curve, a feeling of a ribbon that is going around the arm. Can you see that? You can see the shade. Hopefully you can see the shade of that in there. And then if we, in terms of shape, it's quite obvious that there is no straight bone that's going completely straight, and there are no cavities that are created that are square or rectangular or of clear shapes from the skull through the rib cage, the whole spine, all our joint surfaces. See here, this is what I was talking about, of how the bone changes in orientation. So we have the bone itself being shaped, not squarely. So there are no clean lines, but also in terms of how they are set. So we can see now, if we see the ears of the pelvis, they are shaped in this ear-like type of an ear-like shape. But if we take a look at it from the front or from this side, this is perfect actually. You can see that it is set in an oblique position, so it's not square like it would be going out here. So it's set in an oblique position, and it has a curvy type of shape. So now if we take a closer look at the spine, we will notice that, as we said before, it is an accumulation of curves, and we have one curve here, then the opposite curve here, the opposite curve here, and it's changing back at the tail end. So if we go up at the neck portion, we'll see that we have this type of arrangement, so it curves in this way. And then at this section, it changes its orientation and it's curving in. And this is, of course, linked to the rib cage that's coming around and towards the front. So it's curving in this way. And then somewhere around this point, and this is quite an interesting point, we'll talk about it a little bit later, it is where we see the change from the thoracic spine to the lumbar spine, where we're going back to this sort of arrangement. And then again, that last piece of our spine that is reaching our tail, and it's changing again the end of the lumbar spine somewhere around here, and the end of the spine in total. So if we think about all these the cues that we hear in various classes, and we try to think about what they would do to our spine. So pulling the belly button in, and you have this force pulling in from the front, pressing in from the front. So it's trying to change the articulation of this part of the spine, the lumbar spine, and dropping, and an attempt to drop the hips even further and follow. So the lumbar spine it's an attempt to change its curve from this orientation to this orientation. So that's one. Another cue, which is quite often, let me turn Skelly over a little bit, it is squeezing the shoulder blades together. And this is usually given as an attempt to pull up the shoulders away. So it will feel like a compression from the back, and it would again change the orientation of the thoracic spine from a curve to a flexion. So one thing to ask is, why do we want to change this and this when we are built? And if I zoom out and we take a look at my skeleton here, if you take a look at the skeleton is standing pretty straight up. I think his posture is quite good, don't you think? So why is it necessary for us to change these curves that are in our bodies? That's how our bodies are built, in order to have good posture. So let's explore a little bit that anatomical center that I mentioned to you before, and we're talking about this part over here where the thoracic spine is changing into the lumbar spine. So there is this is a mechanical center where different things are happening. It is a place where similar structures we have at the bottom and at the top of it. There is similar structures on the right and on the left of it. There are many different things that are going through it, across from it. And it is also a point of meeting and a connecting point. So, for example, we have a brain down here, and we have a brain up here. We have a safe structure here and a safe structure here, and they're both in the ways of bowls, either this way or in this orientation. We have multiple organs over at the top, in the center, and at the bottom. We have muscles that are linking, going through that point. We have ligaments going through that point, and we also have change. We have the change of the thoracic curve into the lumbar curve that we were talking about before. And interestingly enough, if we change Skelly around, we will see that this point here, it is approximately where probably your tango teacher has asked you to focus on while leading. It is also where the psoas would go and link to. So this is the point where we would have the linkage to our legs. And this is the area where the dome of the diaphragm is. So if your teacher is saying focus on your diaphragm, they're still talking about the same area, the same space. And again, coming back to that anatomical center, another interesting part which will help us a lot with our understanding of tango is that the facets of the spine, we can see here, these are the facets, the little ears. Let's see, like these ones. This with this, the surface that they are meeting over is changing orientation, and we have this is the anatomical center. Below we have this orientation. Right there we go. This is one facet and the other, and above the anatomical center is this. So again, it is exactly the same idea. They are not connected, but this is their orientation here compared to here. So you can imagine that when we, for example, side bend, and if I push Skelly off to the side, you can see how if I really try not to follow the shape and that orientation, then we have really compressing, they're really one side very compressed and the other side moving again. So if you see it again, and I'm trying not to allow any other movement, if I try to go straight to the side, you have this side compressing, these facets moving away. So what actually happens is when you actually move to the side, these facets are moving accordingly. So there is a little bit, I'm going to zoom out, there is a little bit of a turn. And the turn is in the opposite direction from top to bottom because the orientation of these facets is different. So these surfaces and these surfaces, because of how their orientation is, they're going to slide differently. That makes sense, right? So it's not going to be a clean, flat side bend. There's going to be a little bit of a twist. And of course, guess what? If you are twisting, then these surfaces will also allow for a little bit of a side bend. And let's take a look at the hip joint itself. So not only we have this ear that has that is not straight in any way. So as we said, it is set up in this oblique orientation. So it's not straight. It is curving outward, but at the same time, it is curving this way. So it's curving this way and it's curving this way. And then the back, it's curving this way. So it is quite interesting. And then inside, within the hip joint itself, I'm going to turn Skelly around here so you can see it better. And this is not a, again, a mistake in how this thing is made. This is actually quite accurate. So you can see that there is space here. So obviously coming up this way with a leg wouldn't make this the safest choice, and or the most the strongest choice compared to the outer part where we have this action. So if you can see, there is a break in this position that we were talking about before, and more support at the back. So this this cavity that we have here, it is in itself, again, it is not a really straightforward one. It has an opening at the bottom right here, and it has an egg-like, a cave-like shape. And the shape itself, it's not exactly, it drops down here and, oops, let's take the arm away. So it drops down here and goes up here, and it wiggles its way down in there. Now, if we take a look at the femur, its axis is moving in this direction and not parallel to the floor in this direction. So it makes sense, if we want to say that we stay congruent inside the hip, to understand how it is for this bone to move inside this weird cavity, and how it is to move around this axis and not avoiding it or moving around an axis that goes parallel to the floor. So that would mean that when you are lifting your leg, if you're moving along this axis, you can see that the leg is going in towards the center. So if you are to swing through, and this is part of how we walk, moving the leg around, swinging the leg, being very much aware of the hip joint axis, then your leg, as you're moving in, as we're looking down, is going to be moving in. But again, we have this cavity that it is not really straightforward. So it is opening up a little bit towards the inner part, similar to the hip. More support we have through the back, and it is a smooth surface that allows for this action to happen. So again, if we look at the axis of the bone, we have a similar axis around the ball. This is somewhere around the center. We don't have a neck like we have in our leg, but this would be the axis around which we would, if we wanted to be congruent, we would be turning this bone around. So again, you can see that it cannot go, it can. If it goes straight up, it's moving around a different axis. But if we are to move around this axis, being aware of how the bone is structured, then we would have to be moving the arm a little bit towards the center. So not straight up, but a little bit in.